She walked into the training camp like she'd taken a wrong turn at a gas station. Faded t-shirt, scuffed boots, a backpack held together by grit, and a single strap. Emma Carter didn't look like a soldier. She looked like someone who'd wandered in from a late-night shift at a diner. Her hair tied low, her face plain. No trace of the polish you'd expect from a recruit at Fort Bradley, one of the toughest NATO training grounds in the Carolinas. The other cadets smirked, their laughter sharp, slicing through the humid morning air. "Army's hiring dishwashers now?" one called out. Emma didn't flinch. Her eyes, steady and unreadable, scanned the yard like she was waiting for a signal no one else could hear. If stories like this speak to you, hit the like button and subscribe. There's more to come. The camp was a machine, churning out soldiers through sweat and dirt. Recruits jogged in formation, their boots pounding the earth, while instructors barked orders that echoed off the pine trees. Emma stood out, not because she tried, but because she didn't. Her clothes were worn, her movements quiet, her presence almost invisible. Yet something about her stillness drew attention. It wasn't defiance, it was patience, the kind that makes you wonder what someone's hiding. The others, young and loud, saw her as an easy target. They didn't know she carried a weight heavier than their gear, a past forged in shadows they'd never understand. The first day was brutal. Captain Daniels, a man built like a brick wall, paced the yard, his voice a thunderclap. He stopped in front of Emma, his eyes narrowing. "You lost, cadet? Supply crews that way." The group snickered, their laughter a wave crashing over her. A girl named Kristen, all sharp cheekbones and sharper tongue, leaned toward the cadet next to her. "Bet she's here to fill a quota. Diversity checkmark, right?" Emma's face didn't change. She met Daniel's gaze, her voice calm. "I'm a cadet, sir." He snorted, waving her off. "Get in line. Don't hold us up." In the mess hall, the noise was deafening. Recruits swapped stories, their voices loud, their egos louder. Emma carried her tray to a corner table, away from the chaos. She sat alone, her fork moving slowly, her eyes on her plate. A guy named Tyler, lean and cocky with a buzz cut, spotted her. He strode over, dropping his tray with a clatter. "Yo, thrift store," he said, loud enough for the nearby tables to turn. "This ain't a homeless shelter. Sure you're in the right place?" The group behind him laughed, their eyes gleaming with amusement. Emma paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "I'm eating," she said, her voice steady. Tyler leaned in, smirking. "Eat faster. You're taking up space real soldiers need." He flicked her tray, sending mashed potatoes splattering onto her shirt. The room roared. Emma wiped the mess with a napkin, her hands slow, and took another bite, like he wasn't even there. Warm-ups were a test of will. Push-ups until your arms burned. Sprints that left your lungs screaming. Burpees in the dirt under a blazing sun. Emma kept pace, her breathing even, but her shoelaces kept slipping. They were old, frayed, barely holding her boots together. During a sprint, a guy named Ethan jogged up beside her. Ethan was the group's golden boy, broad-shouldered, with a grin that said he'd never lost at anything. "Yo, yard sale," he called, loud enough for the line to hear. "Your shoes giving up? Or is that you?" The group laughed, their voices carrying across the field. Emma didn't answer. She knelt, retied her laces with quick fingers, and stood. But as she did, Ethan bumped her shoulder hard. She stumbled, her hands hitting the mud, her knees sinking into the wet earth. The group howled. "What's that, Carter?" Ethan said, smirking, signing up to mop floors. Emma got up, wiped her palms on her pants, and ran on. Not a word. The laughter followed her, sharp and relentless. During a break, Emma sat on a bench, pulling a granola bar from her bag. Kristen sauntered over with two other cadets, her arms crossed, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Emma, right? So, where you from?" Did you win a raffle to be here?" Her friends giggled, one covering her mouth like it was too funny. Emma took a bite, chewed slowly, and looked up. "I applied," she said, her voice flat, like she was talking about the weather. Kristen's smile tightened. "Okay, but why?" "You don't exactly scream, soldier. I mean, look at you." She waved a hand at Emma's muddy t-shirt, her plain brown hair. Emma set her granola bar down, leaned forward just enough to make Kristen flinch. "I'm here to train," she said, "not to make you feel better about yourself." Kristen froze, her cheeks reddening. "Whatever," she muttered, turning away. Freak. The navigation drill was next. A race through a forested ridge with a map and a ticking clock. Emma moved alone, her compass steady, her steps quiet against the pine needles. A group of cadets, led by a wiry guy named Jake, spotted her checking her map under a tree. Jake, always chasing Ethan's spotlight, saw his chance. "Hey, lost girl," he called, his voice cutting through the quiet. "You out here picking daisies?" His group laughed, circling closer. Emma folded her map, her fingers deliberate, and kept walking. Jake jogged up, snatching the map from her hands. "Let's see how you do without this," he said, tearing it in half and tossing the pieces into the wind. The others cheered. Emma stopped, her eyes following the scraps as they fluttered away. She looked at Jake, her face blank. "Hope you know your way back," she said. Then she turned and kept moving, her pace unchanged. Jake's laughter faltered, but his group kept jeering, their voices echoing through the trees. Emma's silence wasn't weakness. It was a shield, forged long before she set foot in Fort Bradley. She'd learned to carry herself this way, to let the world underestimate her. The cadets saw a nobody, a girl who didn't belong. They didn't see the hours she'd spent training in places no one talked about, under eyes that saw more than they said. Emma didn't need their approval. She was waiting, not for their respect, but for the moment when the truth would speak for itself. And that moment was coming, closer, with every step she took. The rifle disassembly drill was a wake-up call. 2 minutes to take apart an M4 carbine, clean it, and put it back together. Most cadets fumbled, their fingers slipping on pins, cursing as parts hit the dirt. Ethan, the golden boy, finished in a messy 143, grinning like he'd won a medal. Kristen scraped by at 159, her hands shaking as she snapped the last piece in place. Then Emma stepped up. No rush, no hesitation. Her hands moved like they knew the gun better than she knew herself. Pin out, bolt free, parts laid out in a perfect grid. 52 seconds. Not a single mistake. Sergeant Brooks, the instructor, stared at the timer, then at her. "Carter," he said, his voice low. "Where'd you learn that?" Emma wiped her hands on her pants, her eyes on the ground. "Practice, sir." The training screen replayed her work in slow motion, every move clean, no wasted motion. A lieutenant nearby muttered to Brooks. Her hands didn't shake. "That's Special Forces steady." Ethan overheard and scoffed, loud enough for Emma to hear. "So she can clean a gun. Doesn't mean she can fight." The whispers started after that. Cadets glanced at Emma during breaks, trying to piece her together. She didn't care. She sat on the grass, retying her frayed laces, her face as blank as ever. Kristen leaned over to Ethan, her voice sharp. "Bet she's got some sob story. Poor kid from nowhere, trying to prove something." Ethan laughed. "Yeah, well, she's proving she's nobody." Emma's fingers paused on her laces. Just for a moment. Then she kept tying, her movements slow, like she was sealing something inside her. The truth was, Emma wasn't from nowhere. She'd grown up in a world of gated estates and private tutors, a life of wealth she'd walked away from. But she didn't carry that world with her. She carried something else, something heavier. etched into her bones by years of training no one here could imagine. In the equipment shed, Emma waited her turn, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The quartermaster, a gruff man named Harris, handed out vests and helmets with a scowl. When Emma stepped up, he looked her over, his lip curling. "What's this, a yard sale?" "We don't got gear for civilians, sweetheart." He tossed her a vest 2 sizes too big, the straps dangling uselessly. The cadets behind her snickered. "Use it as a tent," one called. Emma caught the vest, her fingers tightening around the canvas. She didn't argue, didn't ask for a replacement. She walked out, her boots echoing on the concrete. Outside, she adjusted the vest with quick knots, making it fit perfectly, her hands moving with the same precision she'd shown with the rifle. Harris laughed back in the shed, shaking his head. "That one's washing out by tomorrow," he said. The cadets laughed, but Emma was already gone, her silhouette fading into the dusk. The terrain run was brutal. 10 miles over rough ground, full gear, no brakes. Emma stayed in the middle of the pack, her breathing even, her steps steady. Kristen was right behind her, muttering the whole time. "Pick it up, Charity Case. You're dragging us down." At the halfway mark, Kristen nudged Emma's elbow, just enough to throw her off. Emma's foot caught a rock, and she veered off the path, her ankle twisting as she hit the ground. Captain Daniels saw it. "Carter," he roared. "Broke formation. Squad loses points." The group groaned, some shooting her dirty looks. Ethan turned, his face flushed. "Nice one, Carter. Real team player." Emma didn't argue. She got back in line, her jaw tight, and kept running, her limp barely noticeable. When the run ended, Daniels pointed at her. 5 extra laps. Move." The others watched, some smirking, as Emma started running again, her breath coming in short gasps. She finished, her face slick with sweat, her hands on her knees. No one offered her water. Kristen tossed an empty bottle at her feet. "Hydrate with air," she said, laughing. Emma picked up the bottle, crushed it in her hand, and dropped it in the trash. Not a sound. During a night drill, the cadets set up a perimeter under simulated enemy fire. Flares lit the sky, and instructors shouted orders, creating chaos. Emma worked alone, securing a rope barrier with steady hands. A cadet named Caleb, stocky and loud, decided she was an easy target. He grabbed her rope, yanking it free, and tossed it into the mud. "Oops," he said, grinning. "Guess you're not cut out for this, huh?" The others nearby laughed, their flashlights bobbing. Emma knelt, picked up the rope, and started over, her fingers moving methodically. Caleb wasn't done. He kicked dirt onto her hands, coating the rope in grime. "Keep trying, princess. Maybe you'll get it by morning." The group roared. Emma paused, her hands still, then looked up at him. "You done?" Her voice was quiet but sharp. Caleb blinked, thrown off, but laughed it off. She went back to work, the rope clean again in seconds. Later, Caleb's barrier was found loose, costing his squad points. No one saw Emma near it, but a quiet cadet named Mia, who'd been watching her closely, hid a small smile. That night in the barracks, Emma sat on her bunk, pulling an old photo from her bag. It was creased, the edges worn, showing a younger her standing next to a man in a black jacket. His face was blurred, but his posture, shoulders back, eyes sharp, carried weight. She traced her finger over the photo, her lips pressing together, then tucked it away when she heard footsteps. Ethan walked by, tossing his towel over his shoulder. "Sleep tight, Carter. Tomorrow's shooting. Don't choke." Emma didn't look at him. She lay back, hands behind her head, staring at the ceiling, her breathing slow. The photo wasn't just a memory. It was a promise, one she'd made years ago in a place no one here could ever find. She'd trained under someone who saw her, not her family's money, not her name, but her quiet, her will. 6 years, she'd learned to move like a shadow, to carry pain without breaking. That promise was why she was here, why she endured. The long-range shooting exam was next. 5 shots, 400 yards, 5 bullseyes, or you're out. The cadets lined up, nervous, fiddling with their scopes, whispering about wind speed. Kristen went first, missing 2 shots, her face pale as she stepped back. Ethan hit 4, cursing under his breath. Then Emma walked up. Kristen whispered to the girl next to her, "Bet she can't even hold it right." Emma settled into position, her movements calm, almost mechanical. 5 shots, 5 perfect hits, dead center. No hesitation, no scope adjustments. The range officer blinked at the target, then called it out. Carter, perfect score. A colonel watching from a distance, an older man with gray hair and a chest full of medals, leaned forward. "Who trained her?" he murmured to his aide. "That's a Spec Ops trigger." Ethan overheard and rolled his eyes. "Fluke," he said. "Let's see her in combat." But during the equipment check, an officer found Emma's rifle had a misaligned sight. She'd still hit every shot, compensating perfectly. The officer shook his head. "That's not luck. That's skill." Emma's skills were starting to crack the facade the others had built around her. She wasn't just a nobody anymore. The cadets' laughter was quieter now, their glances longer. They didn't know her story, but they felt its weight. Emma didn't need them to understand. She'd come to Fort Bradley for herself, to test the promise she'd made. But the camp was about to learn what that promise meant, and it would change everything. The combat simulation was the real test. One-on-one, hand-to-hand, no weapons. Emma was paired against Ethan, who towered over her, his fists clenched, a grin spreading across his face. The yard buzzed with cadets, their eyes gleaming, expecting a quick win for their golden boy. Kristen leaned against a post, arms crossed, smirking. "This'll be over in 10 seconds, she muttered to the girl next to her. Ethan charged before the whistle, grabbing Emma's collar and slamming her against the wall. Her t-shirt tore, the fabric ripping from her shoulder to her back, exposing a faded black tattoo across her scapula. The squad burst into laughter. "She's inked up too," Kristen jeered. "What is this, a biker gang?" Ethan leaned in, his face inches from hers. "This ain't daycare, Carter. Go home, rookie." Emma didn't move, her eyes locked on his, steady, unblinking. "Let go," she said, her voice low. He laughed, but his grip loosened for a second. She stepped back, turned, and the torn shirt fell lower, revealing the full tattoo, a coiled black serpent with a shattered skull. The yard went silent. A colonel, gray-haired with a chest heavy with medals, stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. His eyes widened, his face pale. "Who gave you the right to wear that mark?" he asked, his voice shaking. Emma stood there, her back straight, the tattoo stark against her skin. "I didn't ask for it," she said quietly. "It was given by Black Serpent himself. I trained under him for 6 years. The colonel froze, then straightened, his hand snapping to his forehead in a salute. The other officers stared, mouths open. Ethan stumbled back, his face drained of color. An aide whispered to another, "No one bears that tattoo unless they're his final student." Kristen's smirk vanished. She looked away, her hands trembling. Black Serpent wasn't just a name. It was a ghost. A whisper from a unit erased from records 5 years ago. Stories lingered. Missions that never happened. Operatives who vanished. A leader who trained only a few, each marked with that tattoo. Emma didn't look at the colonel, didn't look at anyone. She pulled her torn shirt over her shoulder and walked to the edge of the yard, her steps slow, deliberate. The silence followed her, heavy, unbroken. Ethan couldn't let it go. His pride wouldn't allow it. He stood in the middle of the yard, fists clenched, his voice echoing. So what if she's got a tattoo? Prove it in a real fight. The cadets looked at each other, unsure. Emma stopped walking. She turned, her eyes cold. If that's what you want, she didn't fix her shirt, just let it hang. The tattoo still visible, her stance calm but unyielding. Ethan charged, swinging wildly, his fists aimed at her face. Emma dodged every punch, her movements fluid, almost effortless. He yelled, "Hit me already!" She didn't. She let him tire himself out, his swing sloppier, his breath ragged. Then in one motion she stepped forward. A snap choke, her arm around his neck, a twist, a pull, 8 seconds. Ethan collapsed, unconscious, his body limp on the ground. No one spoke. Captain Daniels walked over, his face unreadable. He looked at Ethan, then at Emma, then at the group. Effective immediately, he said, "Emma Carter is honorary instructor. You'll learn from her." Emma didn't nod, didn't smile. She picked up her backpack, pulled her torn shirt closed, and walked off. The cadets parted for her, their eyes down, their laughter gone. The next morning, during a strategy briefing, Emma sat in the back, her notebook open, her pen moving quickly. Major Klein, a stern woman with a voice like steel, was explaining defensive tactics when she called on Emma, her tone sharp. "Carter, you got something to add, or are you just doodling back there?" The room turned, expecting her to shrink. Emma looked up, her pen still. "Your flanks exposed on the left. You'd lose half your unit in an ambush." Klein blinked, caught off guard. "Explain," she said. Emma stood, walked to the board, and drew a quick adjustment, her lines precise. "Shift your scouts here. Cuts their angle of attack." The room was silent. Klein nodded slowly. "Noted. Sit down." As Emma returned to her seat, Kristen whispered, "Teacher's pet now." Klein overheard and snapped, "Quiet, cadet. She just saved your hypothetical lives." Kristen's face burned, and the room shifted, eyes lingering on Emma with new respect. The camp wasn't the same after that. The air felt heavier, the whispers quieter. Emma's tattoo had changed everything, not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. She wasn't just a cadet anymore. She was something else, something the others couldn't touch. But Emma didn't revel in it. She didn't need their awe. She'd come to Fort Bradley to test herself, to carry the promise she'd made to Black Serpent, to the man who'd seen her when no one else did. That promise wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving herself right. During a live-fire exercise, Emma was assigned to lead a small team through a mock urban assault. Her group included Kristen, who rolled her eyes at the assignment. As they moved through the course, Kristen ignored Emma's signals, rushing ahead and triggering a tripwire that set off a deafening siren. The exercise halted. Daniel stormed over, his face red. "Carter, your team's a mess." Kristen smirked, whispering to Tyler, "Told you she's useless." Emma stood there, her hands steady. Kristen broke formation. I signaled her to wait. Daniels turned to Kristen, who shrugged. "Didn't see it." The group snickered, blaming Emma. She didn't argue, just nodded. "Understood, sir." But an overhead drone replay showed Kristen ignoring the signal, clear as day. Daniels watched the footage, his jaw tight, and docked Kristen's squad points. The group's laughter died. Kristen's face went pale. Emma's truth was starting to seep into the camp like water through cracks in stone. The cadets who'd mocked her, who'd tossed empty bottles, who'd laughed at her muddy boots, were starting to see her differently. Not all of them, not yet. Kristen still whispered. Ethan nursed his bruised ego in the medical bay, and others clung to their scorn, but the tide was turning. Emma didn't push it. She didn't need to. She taught the next drill with the same quiet precision, showing rifle stances, her hands steady, her voice low. Some cadets scribbled notes, others just watched, their eyes tracing the outline of a woman they'd misjudged. She wasn't here to win them over. She was here to keep a promise, one inked into her skin, one that had carried her through years of training in places no one spoke of. The camp was just a stop along the way. But for the cadets, for the ones who'd laughed and the ones who'd started to listen, Emma was becoming something else. A mirror, reflecting their own flaws, their own strength, their own choices. And that mirror was about to show them more than they were ready to see. Emma stood at the front of the training yard, her backpack over one shoulder, a plain black t-shirt replacing the torn one. She didn't bark orders or raise her voice. She showed the cadets rifle drills, her hands moving with a precision that felt like a language of its own. Combat stances, reloads, movements that looked simple but took years to master. Some cadets scribbled notes, their pencils scratching against paper. Others just stared, their eyes tracing the woman they'd once laughed at. Kristen sat in the back, arms crossed, her face pale, her usual smirk gone. Ethan wasn't there. Word was he'd been sent to medical, then reassigned to a desk job at a base in the middle of nowhere. No one talked about it, but everyone knew. Emma's chokehold had ended more than just a fight. It had ended his place here. The yard was quieter now, the cadets' laughter replaced by a tense focus. Emma's presence demanded it, not through force, but through something deeper, something that made you want to stand straighter. She corrected a cadet's grip, her voice low. Keep your elbow in, saves you 1/10 of a second. The cadet nodded, adjusting without a word. Another asked about recoil management, his tone hesitant, like he wasn't sure she'd answer. She did. Her explanation brief but exact. Brace here, not here. Less kick, more control. The group listened, their notebooks open, their egos checked. But Emma's eyes stayed distant, her mind somewhere else, carrying a weight the cadets couldn't see. In a first aid drill, Emma was paired with Tyler, the one who'd flicked mashed potatoes onto her shirt in the mess hall. They had to treat a simulated casualty under time pressure, a dummy with fake blood pooling on the ground. Tyler, eager to show off, shoved Emma aside as she reached for the bandage kit. "I got this. You'd probably just make it worse." He fumbled the bandages, wrapping them too loose, the dummy's wounds still seeping. The instructor, a medic named Carter, shook his head. "You're killing him, cadet." Tyler's face reddened. He snapped, pointing at Emma. "She distracted me." The group laughed, egging him on, their old habits creeping back. Emma stepped forward, her hands steady, and redid the bandages in seconds, her wraps tight, perfect. Carter nodded, impressed. "That's how it's done." Tyler stormed off, muttering, but the group's laughter faded into murmurs. Later, Carter pulled Emma aside and handed her a medic patch. "You earned this." She took it, her face blank, and slipped it into her bag. The camp's rhythm had shifted, but not everyone was ready to accept it. Kristen, still stinging from the drone footage that exposed her mistake, whispered to a small group during a break. "She's not that special. Just got lucky with a tattoo and a few tricks." Her voice was low, but it carried, and a few cadets nodded, their pride bruised by Emma's rise. One of them, a guy named Lucas, decided to test her. During a night navigation drill, he slipped a rock into her backpack while she adjusted her compass. The extra weight was subtle, but enough to slow her down on the 5-mile trek. Emma noticed the drag halfway through, her steps heavier, her shoulders straining. She stopped, opened her bag, and pulled out the rock, her face unreadable. Lucas watched from a distance, smirking, expecting her to call him out. She didn't. She dropped the rock, adjusted her straps, and kept moving, finishing the course on time. Lucas's smirk faded. The next day, his own pack was found unzipped, his gear scattered during a surprise inspection. No one saw Emma near it, but Mia, the quiet cadet who'd given her a map, caught her eye and nodded. Just once. Emma's strength wasn't just in her skills. It was in her restraint, the way she let the world underestimate her and still came out on top. She didn't need to shout or fight every battle. She chose the ones that mattered. But the weight of being seen, of being known, was starting to press on her. In the barracks at night, she sat on her bunk, pulling out the worn photo of her and the man in the black jacket. Her finger traced his blurred face, her lips pressing together. "You didn't tell me it'd be this heavy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She tucked the photo away, lying back, her eyes on the ceiling. The promise she'd made to Black Serpent wasn't just about surviving. It was about carrying his lessons, his silence, his way of moving through a world that didn't understand. During a team strategy drill, Emma was tasked with leading a squad through a simulated ambush. She gave clear signals, her voice steady, her plan precise. But Kristen, still in her squad, lagged behind, muttering to Tyler, "Why's she even in charge? She's not one of us." At a critical moment, Kristen ignored Emma's order to hold position, rushing forward to prove herself. Her move triggered a flare, signaling enemy detection, and the drill ended in failure. Captain Daniel stormed over, his voice booming, "Carter, your squad's a disaster. Explain." Kristen jumped in before Emma could speak. She didn't signal clearly. "I thought we were moving." The group snickered, ready to pile on. Emma stood there, her hands in her pockets. "I signaled twice. Check the footage." Daniels glared at Kristen, then called for the drone replay. The screen showed Emma's clear hand signals, Kristen's deliberate ignore. Daniels docked Kristen's squad points again, his voice cold. "You're costing your team, cadet. Shape up or ship out." Kristen's face burned, and for the first time, she had no comeback. The cadets were starting to split. Some, like Mia and a few others, watched Emma with quiet respect, their notebooks filled with her techniques. Others, like Kristen and Lucas, clung to their resentment, their pride a wall they couldn't climb. But even they felt the shift. Emma wasn't just a cadet anymore. She was a force, one they couldn't ignore. During a break, Mia slipped Emma a bottle of water, her voice low. "You're changing things here." Emma took the bottle, her eyes softening for a moment. "Not trying to, just doing what I came for." Mia smiled, small but genuine. "Keep doing it." Emma's role as honorary instructor gave her authority, but it also made her a target. The ones who'd mocked her now had to follow her, and that stung. Lucas tried one last jab during a rifle drill, loudly questioning her stance. "That's not regulation. You sure you know what you're doing?" The yard went quiet, waiting for her response. Emma didn't look at him. She picked up a rifle, aimed, and fired 5 shots, each a perfect bullseye. She set the rifle down, her voice calm. "Any more questions?" Lucas swallowed, shaking his head. The group moved on, but the message was clear. Emma wasn't here to play their games. She was here to win her own. The camp was learning who Emma was, but she was learning something too. Every drill, every stare, every whisper was a test, not just of her skills, but of her heart. She'd trained to be unbreakable, but Fort Bradley was showing her the cost of being seen. The tattoo on her back wasn't just a mark, it was a chain, tying her to a past she couldn't escape, a promise she couldn't break. And as the days passed, that chain felt heavier, pulling her toward a moment she wasn't sure she was ready for. The camp felt different now, like the air had thickened with something unspoken. Emma moved through it, her steps steady, her black t-shirt a quiet contrast to the chaos around her. The cadets watched her. some with respect, others with unease. Their whispers softer, but still there. Kristen's defiance had faded, her eyes avoiding Emma's during drills. Tyler kept his head down, his cocky grin gone. Lucas, still nursing his pride, muttered to a few loyal followers, but even his jabs lacked their old venom. Emma didn't seek their approval. She taught, she trained, she carried on, her focus on the promise etched into her skin. But the camp was a pressure cooker, and the truth about her was starting to boil over. During a mock urban assault drill, Emma led her squad with precision, her signals clear, her voice low but firm. The team moved through concrete ruins, their rifles up, their boots crunching on gravel. Mia followed her lead, her eyes sharp, while Lucas lagged, his movements sloppy. At a choke point, Emma signaled a halt, sensing a trap. Lucas ignored her, pushing past. "Ambush left," he hissed, trying to take charge. His move triggered a hidden flare and sirens blared, ending the drill. Captain Daniel stormed over, his face like thunder. "Carter, your squad's a failure. Explain." Lucas jumped in, his voice loud. "She froze up, sir. I had to make a call." The group murmured, some nodding, ready to pin it on Emma. She stood there, her hands steady. Lucas moved without clearance. I signaled a hold. Daniels glared, then checked the drone footage. The replay showed Emma's signal, Lucas's reckless charge. Daniels turned to him, his voice cold. "You're off this squad, cadet. Pack your gear." Lucas's face drained of color, and the group went silent. The fallout spread fast. Lucas was reassigned to a supply unit, his dreams of combat glory crushed. Kristen, watching from the sidelines, clutched her water bottle, her knuckles white. She'd seen the pattern now, defy Emma, and the truth would catch up. During a break, she approached Emma, her voice low, almost shaking. "Why didn't you call him out right away? You could have humiliated him." Emma looked at her, her eyes calm. "Didn't need to. He did it to himself." Kristen stood there, searching for a comeback, but found none. She walked away, her shoulders slumped, something shifting inside her. The camp's top brass started talking about Emma in hushed tones. Her name came up in a closed-door meeting, her file passed around like a classified relic. A junior officer, new to Fort Bradley, suggested she lacked leadership, citing her quiet demeanor. The colonel who'd saluted her leaned forward, his voice low. "Carter's file is sealed, but I'll tell you this, she could run this camp blindfolded." He slid a sealed envelope across the table, stamped with a Black Serpent emblem. Her evaluations from Black Serpent. Read them, then talk to me about leadership. The officer opened it, his hands trembling, and went pale. The room stayed silent as he read, his eyes widening with every line. Emma wasn't there. She didn't need to be. Her truth was rewriting the story. That afternoon, an officer approached Emma during a break, his clipboard clutched tightly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice nervous, "someone's here for you." Emma looked up, her eyes narrowing. She followed him to the camp's entrance, where a man stood waiting. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with short-cropped hair and a face that gave nothing away. He wore a black jacket and jeans. No uniform, but the guard stepped back when he moved. The colonel was there too, his hands clasped behind his back. "General," he said, nodding to the man. The man didn't respond. He looked at Emma, his eyes softening for a moment. She walked up to him, her face unreadable, and stopped a few feet away. "You didn't have to come, Michael." He tilted his head, almost smiling. "Yeah, I did." The cadets watching from a distance went quiet. Kristen, standing nearby, dropped her water bottle, the plastic clattering on the ground. The colonel cleared his throat, addressing the group. "This is General Michael Grant," he said, "Emma's husband." The words hit like a shock wave. Michael put a hand on Emma's shoulder. and they walked to the beat-up pickup she'd arrived in. The engine roared to life and they drove off, dust kicking up behind them. No one moved until the truck was gone. The cadets stood frozen, their eyes tracing the fading cloud of dirt. Mia clutched her notebook, her lips parting. "She's his wife? A younger cadet," Sam whispered. "Who is she really?" No one answered. The truth was too big, too heavy, and it settled over the camp like a storm that had passed but left everything changed. Kristen's world unraveled fastest. A video of her mocking Emma in the mess hall, recorded by a cadet with a phone, went viral on a military forum. Her sponsorship with a defense contractor vanished overnight, their email citing conduct concerns. She left the camp a week later, her head down, her bags packed. Lucas's reassignment wasn't the end for him either. His name surfaced in an internal review, and he was discharged for repeated infractions. Tyler and the others who'd laughed, who'd tossed empty bottles, faced no formal punishment, but they carried something heavier. Shame, the kind that lingers, that makes you flinch at your own reflection. Emma's departure left a void, but her presence lingered. Cadets trained harder, their movements sharper, their focus deeper. They'd seen something they couldn't unsee, a woman who'd walked through scorn and walked out with a salute. During a night drill, Sam found Emma's old photo under a bunk, the one with her and the man in the black jacket. He held it up, squinting at the blurred figure. "Who was she to him?" he asked the group. No one answered. Kristen, still there but quieter, looked at the floor. Sam slipped the photo into his pocket, feeling it mattered, even if he didn't know why. The camp's energy had changed, but so had its story. Emma's name stayed on the instructor roster, but she never returned. Some said she was with Michael, running a training program no one could confirm. Others said she'd vanished, like Black Serpent himself. But the cadets who'd seen her, who'd watched her move, who'd felt the weight of her silence, didn't forget. They told her story, passed it down, let it grow. Not a legend, not a myth, just the truth of a woman who didn't need to shout to be heard. Captain Daniels, who'd once yelled at Emma for breaking formation, was quieter now. He'd been called into a meeting with the colonel, and though no one heard what was said, he emerged different. His orders were less harsh, his eyes scanning the yard like he was searching for something he'd missed. The camp was learning, slowly, that strength wasn't always loud, that power didn't always demand a spotlight. Emma had shown them that, and the lesson was sinking in, one cadet at a time. Her story was spreading beyond Fort Bradley, carried by those who'd trained with her, by officers who'd read her file. It reached recruits at other bases, soldiers who'd been judged, who'd been told they didn't belong. They heard about the woman who'd walked into a room full of doubt and left it silent. They understood her restraint, her steady hands, the way she didn't need to explain herself. Her story was theirs. A quiet reminder that truth doesn't need a stage, it just needs time. Fort Bradley carried on, but it wasn't the same. The drills continued, the instructors shouted, the cadets sweated through the Carolina heat, but a quiet had settled over the camp, like the hush after a storm. Emma's absence was a presence, her story woven into the rhythm of the place. Cadets moved with a new focus, their eyes sharper, their hands steadier. They didn't talk about her openly, not like they used to mock her, but her name slipped into conversations, a murmured question, a shared glance. Who was she, really? The ones who'd seen her, Sam, Mia, even the ones who'd laughed, carried her lessons in their bones. She'd shown them something they couldn't unlearn. Strength didn't need a spotlight, and truth didn't need a voice to be heard. In the barracks at night, Sam sat on his bunk, the worn photo of Emma and the man in the black jacket in his hands. He'd kept it. Not sure why, but unable to let it go. The man's face was blurred, but his posture, shoulders back, head high, felt like it held a story of its own. Sam traced the edges, his fingers slow. "She didn't belong here," he said to Mia, who sat across from him, her notebook open. "Not like we thought." Mia looked up, her eyes soft. "She belonged more than any of us. She just didn't need us to know it." Sam nodded, slipping the photo into his pocket. He didn't have answers, but he had something else. A feeling, a spark that made him want to be better, to carry himself the way Emma had. The camp's changes went deeper than the cadets. Captain Daniels, once a wall of noise and fury, had softened, his orders less like thunder, more like a steady drum. He'd started watching the recruits differently, searching for the ones who moved quietly, who worked without fanfare. In a rare moment during a break, he pulled Mia aside. "You saw her, didn't you?" he asked, his voice low. "What she was?" Mia nodded, unsure what to say. Daniels looked out at the yard, his jaw tight. "Don't let that go to waste. Learn from it." He walked off, leaving Mia standing there, her heart pounding. Daniels had been humbled, not by Emma's skills, but by her silence, by the way she'd carried a truth he'd missed. Kristen's departure left a mark, too. Her bags were gone, her bunk empty, but the story of her fall spread. The viral video of her mocking Emma had reached beyond the camp, hitting military forums, sparking debates about character and consequence. The defense contractor who dropped her faced a PR storm, their stock dipping as online outrage grew. Kristen's name became a cautionary tale whispered among cadets as a warning. Pride could cost you everything. Tyler, quieter now, avoided the mess hall corner where he'd flicked food at Emma. He trained harder, his eyes down, like he was trying to outrun his own shame. Lucas, discharged and gone, was a ghost now, his family name tarnished in military circles. The ones who'd tossed empty bottles, who'd laughed at Emma's muddy boots, carried their own weight. No formal punishment, but the kind of regret that lingers, that makes you question who you are. Emma's story didn't stay in Fort Bradley. It traveled, carried by cadets who'd trained with her, by officers who'd read her sealed file. It reached other bases, other soldiers, men and women who'd been judged, who'd been told they didn't belong. A recruit in Virginia heard about the woman who'd walked through scorn and walked out with a general's salute. A veteran in Texas, retired, but still tied to the military world, nodded when he heard her name. "She's one of us," he said to his wife, his voice thick, "the ones who don't need to shout." Her story found the older folks, the ones who'd spent their lives proving themselves in rooms that didn't want them. They understood her restraint, her steady hands, the way she let the world catch up to her truth. In a small town in Ohio, a young woman named Sarah, barely 18, heard Emma's story from her cousin, a Fort Bradley cadet. Sarah, who'd been told she was too quiet, too small for the Army, sat on her porch, staring at the enlistment papers in her lap. She thought of Emma, of the woman who'd walked into a camp full of doubt and left it changed. Sarah signed the papers that night, her pen steady, her heart full. Emma's story wasn't just a tale, it was a spark, lighting fires in people she'd never meet, people who'd carry her lessons forward, one choice at a time. The camp's final review came a month after Emma left. The top brass gathered, their faces stern, their folders thick with cadet evaluations. Emma's name came up, and the room went quiet. A new officer, unaware of her story, suggested she'd been overrated, a flash in the pan. The colonel leaned forward, his voice low. "You don't know what you're talking about." He pulled out her file, the Black Serpent emblem stark against the paper. "Read this, then tell me who's overrated." The officer read, his hands trembling, and said nothing more. The room moved on, but Emma's shadow lingered, A reminder that some truths don't need a podium to stand tall. Years earlier, Emma had been different. Not softer, but younger, her edges still forming. She'd trained in a compound hidden from the world under a man whose name was never spoken. Black Serpent had chosen her, not for her family's wealth, not for her name, but for her quiet, her will, the way she moved with purpose. 6 years she'd learned his ways, the rifle, the choke, the way to stand so the world noticed without a word. He'd given her the tattoo himself, the needle biting into her skin as he spoke. This isn't a badge, it's a promise. She'd nodded, her jaw tight, and carried that promise ever since. Fort Bradley was just a test, a moment to see if she could keep it. She had. Her story grew, not as a legend, but as a truth. Cadets at Fort Bradley told it to new recruits, their voices low, their eyes bright. Officers shared it in briefings, a case study in resilience. It reached civilians too, through forums, through whispers, through the ones who'd seen her and couldn't forget. Emma didn't know. She didn't need to. She was out there somewhere with Michael, maybe training others, maybe living quietly, her promise kept. The world was catching up, like it always does, to the ones who walk their truth without a sound. Conclusion. Emma's story isn't just hers. It's for anyone who's ever been pushed aside, told they don't belong, their worth measured by someone else's yardstick. She didn't need to shout, didn't need to prove herself to a room full of doubters. She carried her truth in her hands, her steps, the way she stood tall when the world tried to knock her down. That's what stays with you, the quiet power of someone who knows who they are. Fort Bradley was just a chapter, a place where her promise met the world and left it changed. Out there, someone's hearing her story right now, feeling a spark, making a choice to keep going. That's the real victory, not the salute, not the tattoo, but the way her silence spoke to hearts she'll never know. Your time's coming. Hold your ground. You're enough.